hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Cool. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Ehab Sayed. I'm the founder and director of innovation at Biohm. I'm also a PhD researcher at Northumbria University. Today, I'd like to talk about how nature can inspire us all to revolutionize industry and restore local equity in the built environment. But first, I think it is now clearer than ever that our capitalist economies are simply not working. And most importantly, they're not working for the majority of the world's population. The pandemic has revealed multiple flaws in our current systems. It also showed us that capital can be made available in a blink of an eye to support those with power and influence. By being forced to stop almost everything and stay home, we started to collectively and critically question our consumption habits, our production practices, and the way we do business. We look around us and we see that we have contributed to a planet in pain, characterized by the scars we've left upon the geology of the Earth, as well as the onset of the sixth great extinction. This has become known as the Anthropocene. Whilst we once lived our lives as part of the natural world, the world we've built for ourselves is marked by a form of extraction and consumption that is changing the world around us. The land, the air, the water is saturated with pollution, and the world is hotter than it has been for 120,000 years. With the population of the planet predicted to increase by nearly 40% in the next few decades, the demands placed upon our world have far exceeded a point of sustainability. If the combined infrastructure plans of growing and developing economies are ever to be realized, we will need a further 7 planets worth of resources. But in nature, everything's in constant flow, constant circulation, with outputs from one process becoming the inputs for others. Left to its own devices, nature manages resources in a highly efficient and balanced manner, ensuring equilibrium is achieved in all its ecosystems. Biomimetics is not the simple imitation of natural form, but it is a deep understanding of biological processes and systems that lead to a set of principles, which can be extracted and implemented in man-made technologies. The science of biomimetics is driven by the realization that our most prized inventions exist in more elegant, eco-sensitive, efficient, and effective forms in nature. The construction of lily pads, for example, makes our infrastructure seem underwhelming, and our air conditioning technologies and HVAC systems just can't compete with the way termite mounds passively control and maintain exact temperatures throughout the year by building intelligence into their design and using appropriate materials. An in-depth and holistic understanding of how organisms achieve such feats of engineering can shed light on how we can solve some of the world's most pressing challenges. As we move towards relying more on biology as opposed to technology when solving our problems, we find that we use much less energy, less resources, and more structure, more information. And with the advances in technology, computing, and as we're currently gathering enormous amounts of data left, right, and center, we can now mimic nature in ways we could have only imagined. By taking inspiration from nature, we can move away from an extract, make, use, and dispose linear economy, which has a tremendous negative impact on the environment and our health, to one that is circular, where we ethically source, reuse, or recycle existing resources in our economy and consider the environmental, socio-ethical, and economic impact of a material or a product's entire life cycle. And that's exactly what we do at Biohm. Biohm is a research and development-led company that places biological systems at the heart of its inspiration to revolutionize construction and the way that we do business. We achieve this through our bio-based materials, construction systems, and a range of services. And we're starting with the most tangible and immediate of these, and that's our materials. Orb, or organic refuse biocompound, is a semi-structural sheet material made entirely out of food and agricultural waste, and contains a 100% natural binder that we've developed. It is currently available for use in interior architecture and will soon be available for dry lining in buildings. It outperforms other wood-based sheet materials when it comes to mechanical strength. It is carbon negative, does not contain any synthetic chemicals or toxins, and is highly price competitive. Orb is currently being developed into a plant-based concrete, which would be a serious game changer. Our plant-based concrete will be available within the next 2 or 3 years. We also work with one of nature's most wondrous organisms, mushrooms. We use the root systems, or the vegetative part of a mushroom, to consume a variety of organic and synthetic waste streams. And the outcome is one of the world's most advanced building insulation materials. We've developed biologically unique species of mycelium, and we've naturally accelerated their evolution to favor particular traits that would improve their mechanical and physical properties, and we train them to consume a variety of waste streams. We're currently testing our mycelium insulation against industry standards with BRE, the Building Research Establishment, and BBA, the British Board of Agrimont. And we have been blown away by how we managed to achieve thermal conductivity values as low as 0.024, which may not mean very much to most people, but it competes with market-leading synthetic insulation, and in some cases it is 2 to 3 times the thermal insulation values of commonly used alternatives. It's fire resistant. You can see here Zoe Lachlan setting it on fire and having an ice cream on the other side, which was crispy when she bit into it, and when she cut it open you can see the fire barely penetrated the material. And it's naturally fire resistant due to the chitinous nature of mycelium. When tested for heat of combustion, we found that in the event of a fire in a building that uses mycelium insulation, the fire would spread at around half the speed when compared to all other insulation products. For VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, which are released by materials throughout their life and affect the indoor air quality and therefore our health and well-being, we achieved the highest possible score of A+, making it one of the healthiest materials available. No synthetic coatings, all additives, and no chemicals, outperforming almost all other insulation products on the market by simply using nature's genius. And you can see here, alongside insulation, we can also apply it to all kinds of applications in product design, furniture, interior architecture, as well as also other elements of the build. Now, last year, we had an interesting little discovery in our R&D lab, which led us onto a super exciting journey. You may be aware of mycelium's remediation capabilities, known as mycoremediation, which is a process by which fungi produces appropriate enzymes that break down complex compounds like plastics into hydrocarbons and carbon dioxide. We've discovered last year that we've developed mycelium strains that are capable of consuming plastic. The rate of degradation that we were able to achieve was quite significant, and that was quite the revelation. Last year, the Onion Collective, a social enterprise at the vanguard of social action and community business, joined forces with Biohm, and we were awarded the Waitrose Plan Plastic Prize to continue to develop this research further and ensure that such technologies have a transformational impact on local communities. This has allowed us to carry out numerous experiments over the last year, where we continue to evolve our strains through a non-intrusive and non-GMO process known as directed evolution, which basically mimics the process of natural evolution, but in an accelerated lab environment. This has resulted in the development of 3 strains that can successfully consume PU, polyurethane, and PE, polyethylene, which are found in everything from your kettle and toaster to clothes, bottles, and furniture. And unlike other plastic recycling processes, which can propagate the current plastic crisis, encouraging the production of more plastics, our process assimilates or eliminates plastic completely, and all outputs, so the non-toxic hydrocarbons, are stored in the resulting mycelium material, which in itself is a replacement for plastic and other damaging materials, and the carbon dioxide is turned back into oxygen through the process of photosynthesis and fed back into our incubation space, providing fresh, oxygen-rich air to the next batch of mycelium, ensuring a completely closed loop in our manufacturing process and resulting in the production facility effectively being a carbon sink. Although our mycelium insulation, which is currently available, is grown on organic substrates, We aim to eventually integrate plastics and other synthetic waste streams from construction, fashion, and other sectors into our production process. When working with natural materials, it is essential to ensure that appropriate construction systems are used to maintain the building's breathability and end-of-life circularity or even biodegradability. So although our materials are designed to be seamlessly integrated into current practice, we've developed Triagamy, an interlocking construction system that combines all of our materials and is inspired by the way carbon molecules bond to one another. It doesn't require any permanent binders or fasteners to create robust structures that can be deconstructed at any stage of their life, allowing buildings to grow, shrink, and adapt to the needs of its occupants and local community. Architects can design any floor plan and still only use our 21 unique components. It reduces build times by 95%, build costs by 70%, and the environmental impact by a staggering 120%. It's patented in all continents, in almost 60 countries, and we aim to launch Triagamy with our plant-based concrete in around 2 or 3 years from now. Due to the vast environmental benefits and global potential of these technologies, it was essential for us to deliver this to the world in a way that is ethical, equitable, and sensitive to our current economic landscape at a time where it is needed the most. So we're setting up the world's first community-led biomanufacturing facility with Onion Collective. Apart from being the first large-scale facility to produce mycelium insulation, another unique aspect of this collaboration is in the way it acts as a catalyst for regeneration within a community. Again, taking inspiration from nature, we've developed a business model that allows communities to drive industry in quite a revolutionary way that ensures the regeneration of the local community, environment, and economy. Here you can see us standing in one of the last remaining buildings on the site of a paper mill, which was the beating heart of the local economy in Watchet, West Somerset. Watchet is a coastal town in West Somerset, and for 200 years, the paper mill recycled old cloths and other materials into paper, creating a thriving industry in Watchet. But on Christmas Eve in 2015, the mill shut its doors almost overnight, taken with it almost 200 jobs and leaving the town in a very difficult situation. We're taking the mill's heritage into the future by using one of the last remaining buildings to build our biomanufacturing facility, which will be known as Biomill Watchet, and through an ongoing profit share, gradually restore social equity and transform the local economy. As with everything we do, taking inspiration from nature, we can start to map out the major industries as a collection of systems, each containing agents that are capable of influencing their systems. Having an in-depth biomimetic understanding of the way our systems are linked and the role of every agent within each system, we can start to predict how a step change within an industry or an economy can take place. And it is this level of systems thinking inspired by nature that will allow us to work towards a more compassionate and equitable economy, which pushes the boundaries of the circular economy. I'm sure many people here are familiar with this Ellen MacArthur Foundation diagram of the circular economy, showing how technical materials and biological materials need to be kept separate when circulated within industry. For us, we believe we can take this a step further. Technical materials can be recycled and circulated within industries, but still contribute to excessive energy consumption and harmful chemicals and toxins. So as we've proven that 100% natural bio-based materials are not only capable of competing with technical materials, but can even outperform them, we need to start shrinking our technical material circles and grow the biological ones, as our materials can be indefinitely recirculated and only have a positive impact at every stage of their life. That's for the industrial economy. But we need to expand the circles even further. We need to consider the financial economy, which more or less dictates the world we live in. If we look at how our financial economy currently operates, we will see that value is created and extracted in quite a linear and inequitable manner. We have large groups of people building value, yet only the few at the top reap the true reward, indirectly extracting and exploiting the collective value created. Whenever we look at statistics on wealth per capita in countries around the world, we often see something that looks like this. But due to the distribution of wealth within these countries being incredibly skewed towards a very small number of people, we end up with a very inaccurate representation of our economy. Watch It is the perfect example of how a community can severely lose out to a prevailing economic system, where the average annual income per household is around £16,000, and that's per household, not per person. By expanding the circles into the financial economy to recirculate value and wealth where it is being created, we can create a symbiotic relationship between community and industry and enable communities to regenerate themselves from within, much like in nature. And we don't stop there. The entire ecosystem needs to be considered. Governments with policies and legislation, academia with knowledge and resources, and large multinationals with major economic power and market control. All of those players play a critical part of the change. By aligning the incentives, motives, needs, and offerings of the various stakeholders, new ways of doing business and new economies start to emerge. Our first biomanufacturing facility is completely built in Watshire, and production trials have actually started. And it will start at the at the beginning of next year, producing up to 3,000 square meters of insulation panels, which is around 20 homes worth per month. And over the next couple of years, will eventually be scaled to provide enough insulation for 120 homes each month. At that scale, we would be using up around 240 tons of waste and sequestering around 30 tons of carbon each month. That's the work of around 19,000 trees. It would provide our 30 new local jobs, and through the equitable distribution of profits, provide a constant income for the community, allowing them to invest in their education, infrastructure, and social action projects. We're also working with the YMCA to set up the second facility in Newcastle by the end of 2021, and have been invited to set up facilities by governments around the globe. Along with government support, we are working with more than 10 of Europe's top universities, some of the world's largest multinationals, and have been awarded and recognized for our work by national and international bodies. We're working towards a biomimetic future that will allow us to make leaps in the fight against the climate crisis, equitably distribute wealth, and showcase a new global economy that benefits from global interconnectedness and the sharing of knowledge, but works with more reliable local supply chains and empowers local communities. A biomimetic future will help us save time and costs. It will allow us to be more resource and energy efficient, and at a time of climate crisis, where sustainability is simply not enough, it will drive us to venture beyond sustainability and into regeneration, so that we can start healing. And most importantly, it will allow us to look after our psychological and physiological well-being, so that we can be that species that healed the planet they almost lost. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you all very much for listening, and please feel free to ask as many questions as you like.
Thank you so much, Ehab. That was terrific. Very, very inspiring, and just the kind of the reach. You know, what you're talking about a lot of things here, not just material. So yeah, please. I've got some questions, but I know it'd be nice if the students would start off with a. Oh, here we go. Christina's asking a question. How do you adapt material for weathering?
Yeah, really good question. Thank you, Christina. I think the conventional way of developing materials and using materials in buildings, the way to sort of weatherproof them and make them more suitable for, I guess, extreme environments, is to coat them, to add chemicals, to add additives. And we're very much against that approach. And instead of taking that approach, what we would do is we would actually evolve our strains of mycelium to create properties that are more suitable for those applications. So, for example, we wanted to really improve the fire resistance of our insulation. So instead of putting a coating or an additive, we know that a lot of really harmful toxins are used to as fire retardants to protect insulation materials currently on the market. What we would do is we would evolve our mycelium strains to produce more chitin. Now, chitin is found in seashells and in the exoskeleton of insects, and it's nature's fire retardant. So by encouraging the mycelium to produce more chitin and creating a more chitinous sort of material at the end, what you end up with is a much more fire-resistant material. So we like to use biology and sort of engineer the organism in a very non-intrusive and non-GMO way in order to achieve the properties we want, rather than use additives and chemicals and coatings. And the reason for that is when you're adding all these toxic coatings, and they're usually synthetic, you end up compromising on the material's end of life, whether that be biodegradability or reuse or recycling. It just makes it much more difficult to do much with the material at the end of its life. And you see that with wood. You see that happening quite a lot. Where wood is being used, it would always have some kind of synthetic coating on it to enable it to last longer or be more durable. But at the end of that material's life, if it is landfilled or biodegraded, then it will have those toxins and synthetics in them, which will then leach into soils or other, into the biosphere in general. Hello? Can you all still hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So I'll take the next question from Rob.
Yes, sorry. I didn't turn
Insulation
my
performs
microphone on.
better in fire than other insulation. How does it compare? And mineral wool, although may appear to be a natural material, it's actually covered in formaldehyde, and it's also got a chemical coating which will soon be phased out of Europe because of it being so toxic. And that's how it's able to achieve that A1 classification. The heat of combustion tests has allowed BBA to predict that our classification will likely be a B, which obviously isn't as good as A1, but it means that we can apply our material in any building under 18 meters for external walls and internal walls. And for anything above 18 meters, we can only use it in combination of other materials externally or internally on its own. So although it's a B classification, it's still not really prohibitive, especially when we're targeting housing as our initial market. And that's without having any chemicals or additives. That's the material, completely natural, just letting nature do its thing. So you've got Danny, what challenges have you faced scaling up the production of an industry which has only few other precedents? Really good question. It's been so challenging, really. The process of scaling up a technology, especially when you're working with living organisms, there's a lot of hurdles that you have to jump because the equipment isn't available. The processes that you are using, they're completely novel. You're developing them, yourself for the first time, using them for the first time. So what we've had to do is like purchase machinery from the agricultural industry and machinery from the food industry and hack them and combine them and make them work for our processes. And that has not been easy at all. The other thing to keep in mind as well is it's really easy to go down the route of being very energy intensive when you're working with living organisms because you have to maintain environments for them to grow in. You basically have to recreate their natural ecosystem. And conventionally, you would do that, using really advanced HVAC systems. You might also be using some regulators and so on. But we actually take a very passive approach to that. So we know that mycelium generates a lot of heat when it's growing, and we use that heat and reuse it within the facility. All of the outputs, so the humidity, the water, anything like that, is always recirculated within the facility, and all of the energy is from renewable sources. So, there are all these challenges that we've had to work through, and because this is the first time it's being done, we've had to sort of do it on our own. It's been really difficult, but we're really proud that we've finally been able to get there.
Right, thank you. We've got some other good questions coming up here.
Sure. So, Danny, what challenges have you faced scaling up the production? Done that one. Aaron, what do you do with the parts of the mushroom that you don't use in the production of the mycelium sheet? Oh, we actually don't grow mushrooms, Aaron. So we halt the production process, or we stop the growth of the mycelium before it reaches the point of fruiting, which is when it creates the mushroom. If we, went down the route of producing the mushrooms, there are risks of sporulation because the mushrooms can produce spores, and spores are much more difficult to control when they're in an environment. And also, you take away a lot of the material properties of the mycelium. So think of the organism putting all of its effort and work into producing this really great mycelium. It then gets to a point of fruiting, so it starts to produce the mushrooms. A lot of that energy and effort will start going towards producing the mushrooms, which is what it really relies on to propagate, because that's how it, survives and propagates as an organism. So by not getting to that process, you get a much better material at the end. So we don't actually grow the mushrooms. But if we did, we would have definitely put them on some pizza or just ate them. Yeah, Pete has the right idea. Eat them with some pasta. Paul, how does mycelium material work as a primary structure? So structural mycelium, although there's been a lot of buzz about that in the media, we're not quite there yet. In general, as a field, as a material, applying mycelium to structural applications, there are quite a lot of hurdles that we still need to overcome. I'm not saying it's not possible, it's definitely possible, but to be able to produce a mycelium in such a short amount of time that makes it viable for commercialization and scalability, that is structural, that's going to be quite challenging, but I think we'll probably get there within the next 5 years or so. There are lots of types of mycelium and mushrooms in nature that are really solid. They're almost like timber. So that's why I'm saying it's definitely possible. It just takes, years and years for those to form.
Interesting. What kind of waste do you use?
All kinds. So with the current production process, we're only working with natural or organic waste streams and byproducts. So things like hemp shiv, waste from the grain industry, flour mills. We work with grass trimmings, paper, card, and the beauty of this sort of localized production process is we're able to train, because we evolve all of our own strains of mycelium and we create and culture all of our own organisms, we're able to train them and evolve them to basically learn to have an appetite for different types of waste. So we, for example, would have an organization looking to reduce its carbon and looking to process its waste or manage its waste in a more sustainable way. What we would do is we would collect that waste stream off them, we would test it against our mycelium strains, we find the perfect marriage between the strain and the waste stream, and then we start to integrate that into production. At the moment, it's only organic and natural waste streams, but we're soon going to be moving towards also taking in fashion waste streams, and as well as construction waste streams, so things like timber that might have glue or paint on them that are synthetic, because the mycelium actually remediates that as it's growing. And we're also going to be looking at plastic in the future.
You got a couple of questions there from Natalie and Denali about whether it's possible to have a visit to your
Absolutely. I would say, yeah, I would say about March next year, around
We've
that time.
all had an injection. We can come on. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
hopefully. Hopefully, yeah. Absolutely. The production facilities that we're creating are going to be like landmarks in themselves. There's going to be a huge mural, there's going to be a whole visitor route, and it's all about education, interacting with the public, and really, changing perceptions. So that there'll definitely be so much opportunity to visit.
Okay, look, there's lots of questions. Christina is asking whether you can can you paint it, or can you change the color of the material?
Yeah, you can. It's really difficult to do it, whilst it's growing. So we've tried all kinds of colored substrate, and the mycelium is just so stubborn. It always grows white. But after it's grown, you can, just like any other foam material, you can color it. You can use paints. We would obviously suggest that you use natural pigments. But even if you use synthetic pigments, you can then feed it to a mycelium strain that can remediate that, and it becomes a really circular process as well. Um, Something that's really interesting as well is exposure to UV, as well as different special strains of mycelium grow in different colors. So some of them are pink, reddish in color, some of them are blue, purple. So you can, that would be the preferred approach rather than post-processing to actually grow the strains that give you the color that you're looking for. Some of them are more yellow, more brown. I think you can see some of those on our Instagram as well if you're interested.
Okay, well, Danny's got a question here, but he's clearly turned his kitchen into a mycelium lab. But he's saying, any tips for somebody doing this in a DIY way?
Yeah, I mean, I would always encourage people to give it a go. Even if you've got no interest in doing anything with it, but just the process of growing mycelium and or growing mushrooms, it's just really, really interesting. And then once you do that, you'll never walk through a forest or take a walk anywhere and not notice the incredible amounts of mushrooms absolutely everywhere. And it will end up turning into a bit of a habit of just foraging for mushrooms. But in terms of tips, I would just say give it a go. There are so many forums, so many YouTube videos and channels and support online. It's very much an open source field. We are filing our own patents on like certain processes in production and things like that. But it is a very open field. So go ahead and just learn from what's available online. And we do some workshops. We've stopped them now, of course, during COVID. We also allow for visits to our labs and for people to have a look at what we're doing. But again, that probably won't come in until later next year. But I would just say, yeah, there's a lot of knowledge out there, and it's a lot easier than it seems, to actually just give it a go and just play around with the material.
That's great. Yeah, Aaron's asking, can it be transparent, the material?
Not really. I mean, if you grow mycelium on a very thin sheet, then think of it a bit like a spider web. You will see the hyphae of or the hairs of the mycelium growing, and if it's just a very thin layer of it, it is kind of transparent, and you can have light shine through it. I don't know if I've got any here, but you can create also like really thin skins like that of mycelium, and kind of leather-like, and you can, if you get them thin enough, you can have the light shine through them, and it creates like a very marbly, beautiful effect. But as a composite or as like a thick panel, it's quite difficult to have it be transparent.
That's great. Yeah, Rose got a question. She's referencing Merlin Sheldrake's book.
Yeah.
We actually had his father in once. He's an interesting Rupert Sheldrake's character. But nice question. Merlin Sheldrake has spoken about mycelium interactions and communication, suggesting it offers a model of the way we need to look at life. Biome has a strong social ethos. Would you say this is derived from biomimicry?
100%, yeah. So I know Merlin Sheldrake, of course, and you know, the approach that a lot of people that really understand mycelium and that have studied mycelium, we can learn so much from that to apply to our economy and the way that we work. And yes, absolutely, it is biomimicry and biomimetics. You know, the way that we've set up our economies at the moment, it's really built on stories. A lot of these stories are not necessarily our nature or are not necessarily real. But you know, you see a lot of sort of real truths in nature and ecological laws that if we follow those and if we start to adapt our economies and our way of thinking and our concepts towards really taking inspiration from nature and using biomimicry, then we will find that we're living in a much more ethical and equitable world. We're actually appreciating the value that is being created. We have a completely different value system, and really, you know, transform chains. We always say biomimicry isn't a design process or a theory or anything like that. It's a mindset, it's a way of thinking, it's a philosophy, and it can be translated into every aspect of an organization or a person's life. And you know, we apply biomimetics when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to health and well-being in the workplace, when it comes to the way we set up our business models and partnerships. It's exactly, you know, it ends up achieving incredible benefits to everyone involved.
Oh, great, thank you. There's a question about, are you opening different facilities to globalize and mass produce mycelium? I mean, I imagine that would be the plan, but is that?
Yeah, so there's mass production and then there's another kind of mass production. I think, you know, having a huge facility that will be shipping product all around the world is something that we will never do. Having lots of small scale, you know, community-led production facilities is more like what we're looking to achieve. And the idea is to always keep the supply chain local, always keep the value chain local. So, for example, the West Somerset facility will be serving the southern regions of the UK. The Newcastle facility will be serving the northern regions of the UK. We've then got another one coming in the Netherlands, and that will be looking towards like the Amsterdam area around Haarlem and Amsterdam. And then we might have a few more in the Netherlands as well. And it may seem silly that we're building so many facilities with, you know, in close proximity to one another, but it's about keeping production local. It's about having a very transparent supply chain. Our supply chain spans a maximum of 60 miles in each facility. So the idea is that, you know, it's localization rather than globalization. And it's not really mass production in the common way we think of mass production, because we're creating, you know, a maximum of 120 homes per month per facility, which may seem large, but it's absolutely minuscule for the scale of construction, the construction industry.
So Aaron's saying, yeah, he asked the question earlier about transparency. So he's just saying, nice if it could replace glass. And then Denali's saying, yes, Hyde Park. I don't know. I'm not sure about the Hyde Park reference. There's do you have a book? Is there a book?
I've written a chapter in a book. Not so much about mycelium, but about just biomimicry and how it can be applied to procurement and new ways of doing things in construction. It's a book by Dr. Jack Golding, and I can put it in the chat. Actually, I'll put
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, there's a book that book that myself and Pete Silver is coming out next year, which actually talks about your work. You kindly sent us some pictures, so that's very nice of you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
No. So Michael, lots of professors here tonight. It's very good. Michael, Professor of Sustainable Urbanism at Westminster. Your presentation is most inspiring. In fact, my inaugural lecture, UNSW in 2012, is identical to your presentation in all respects, except that my scale is urban and above. I will send you so he sent you the URL for his.
Amazing.
Thank you
so much for that.
Thank you, Michael. That's very good.
If you don't mind me jumping in, this is Michael.
No, please.
Just briefly, terrific. I'm in California right now, near the coast. Very inspiring. just to say that it's great to see more and more people, and led by our students. My close to the inaugural lecture those 8 years ago was, we teach design to our students because they design the future. And when you design the future, the past will follow. So it's terrific to see you doing this work, and our students and many other students following these examples and doing their own innovations and explorations, even beyond what we're doing. It's terrific. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed your lecture.
No, thank you so much for your very kind words. And is it Michael?
Yes.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Michael. I think I can't agree more with you about the power that you have as a student. All of this that I've just talked about started when I was a student doing my master's at Brunel University, and just had the freedom to explore these concepts, had the time to really dig deep. I combined, I think, 6 modules into just looking at the construction industry and health and well-being of the industry and all of that. And once you get into the workspace and careers, it's much more difficult. So I would just say, definitely don't take this time for granted, and just don't be afraid to explore things and follow it. Like, I thought I was just going to get a normal job. I ended up developing a construction system. The industry were just like, you have to patent this, you have to take it to construction, you have to, start developing your own business. And I did it, and it's been the best journey I've ever had. So yeah, never underestimate the power you have as a student.
Great, that's good, great advice. Thank you very much. And there's a question that Pete's asking, which I think is interesting in terms of the structural properties. Is there any research into genetically modifying mycelium to develop its structural properties, e.g. a hybrid with some tensile yarn or other long fibered yarn such as hemp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, I heard the first half that genetically modifying mycelium
to develop its structural properties. So if you like, if a hybrid with hemp or some long fibered plant.
Right. I mean, a hybrid with hemp or a plant is really interesting. I can't remember. There's been quite recently, actually, they found that an organism which was known to be a plant actually ended up being a hybrid between a fungus and a plant. And it's definitely possible. It's definitely something that there has been some research around. All I would say about genetic modification, especially using things like CRISPR or like quite direct manipulation of genes and gene pools, I would just caution people to just be really careful, because we don't understand enough about the side effects of manipulating a gene within a gene pool, what impact that has on the whole gene pool, and what side effects that may result in, especially when we're working with living organisms that may be exposed to the ecosystems or natural environments. And especially when you're working with fungus as well, because fungus can be really aggressive and can be a really invasive species. So just be careful what we're creating. But yes, absolutely, you can, manipulate an organism's properties through genetic modification, or through how it evolves, and how it grows.
Great, thank you. Josh, hello, Josh. He's got a question. Do you think the development of mycelium-based structural materials will come about from new mycelium strains, or from developments in understanding of how mycelium binds to its substrate? Yes, I was sort of interested in that too.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I think the development of new strains is, where you can really create very vast differences in the organism and in the properties of the resultant material. The way that it binds to a substrate, I think, is a really interesting question, because it allows you to, you're using design to get different properties, rather than using the organism's properties, or inherent biological properties. That I would say there's definitely a case for both, and we should definitely explore both. Our director of design, Oksana, she's actually leading a few projects looking at just that, looking at how you can manipulate the properties of the material by using non-woven mats, using really interesting fibers, and creating a scaffolding for the mycelium to grow around. So yeah, it's a really exciting area.
Great. I think that also answers Pete's question. But Erin, another great question. Can it be 3D printed?
Yes, actually, yeah, absolutely. So if you have your mycelium mixed with your substrate, you can 3D print that. And there's a company called Blast Studio that do some really beautiful looking vases and things like that using that process.
Great. Anastasia is asking, can she get in touch? I think she's got a major job for you by the sound of it, which is good. So, good.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I did have my email address on the presentation, but I can share it in the chat. Is the chat going to be part of the recording, or?
I think so. Yeah, I think it saves. Yeah, and also you could copy stuff from. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put in our Biome email address, and that can, if you direct it to me, then I'll be able to catch that straight away.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Paul Chung's asking, is it possible to add other materials into this substrate, like sand or aggregate? It's quite interesting. So, yeah, heavyweight.
Yeah, you can. I think it's just whatever substrate you feed the mycelium, it would need to access the nutrients within it. Aggregates and sand are not, it's something that the mycelium would grow around, or rather than actually consume. It's really difficult to access those nutrients, but it's not impossible. There is a possibility. It's just going to be really difficult. The other thing to consider is the substrate you use dictates the properties of the material as well. So, for example, if we use sawdust, you create a material that is very brittle, that can break really easily. But when you use something that's more fibrous, like hemp shiv or hemp waste, then you create a much stronger material. So I would just keep that in mind. The substrate you feed it completely dictates the properties of the resulting material.
Great. And Denali has another question. If you were to produce locally in, say, a tropical country, would the mycelium be able to naturally evolve to meet that local?
Yeah, really great question, Denali. I think yeah, the way that we grow indoors in controlled environments, but passively controlled. So it doesn't really, it's not completely affected by the external environment in that, you have your own controlled environment. The way it would affect it is you might need to use more energy in extremely hot places, to keep it warm. But arguably, you would do the opposite in cool places the opposite to keep it cold, and in cold places to keep it warm. Because you need to have just the appropriate temperature for the strain to grow at its best. But yeah, I think the local side, the interesting part, and the way that's affected by different geographical locations, is the availability of the waste streams and the byproducts in those areas. So when we're looking at growing mycelium in places like South America, for example, or actually some places in Africa, we would be looking at sugarcane and the waste streams from the sugarcane agricultural process to use in our production. Whereas in the UK, we would never use sugarcane really unless it's from industrial juicers, where it's a byproduct locally. So that's what it would really affect more than the actual climate or the environment that it's growing in.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, so, but in terms of different different strains of mycelium, are they global? I mean, how much are they local? I mean, imagine or does that make a difference? I mean, in terms of what you're engineering, does that?
Mhm.
I mean, what did you start with, for instance? Where did that come from? Where did the?
Yeah. So we've got a vast library of different mycelium strains, and we start from the wild. So we would go foraging and get wild strains. At the earlier stages of the business, we would purchase strains from strain producers for mushrooms for gourmet, so for foods applications, and what we do now is we just forage our own strains, wild strains, and then we just evolve them to improve their properties. Things like button mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, you know, some of like horsehoof mushrooms. Those mushrooms are available in almost, you know, everywhere around the world, or in a lot of places around the world. So we always want to make sure that we're using local species. Even though our labs are obviously and production process are completely sealed, and we kill the mycelium before it's sold as a product, ethically kill the mycelium. Um, we will always prefer to use local species just in case, and because any impact on biodiversity, we would never want to be the cause of that. So we always go more for local species, and we would prefer species that are available all around the world, because it just makes the whole accreditation and standardization of the production process much easier.
Yeah, quite interesting. It's a whole kind of ethical dimension. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, Michael's just he's provided us another link saying the leader in the US is Pliny Fisk at the Centre for Maximum Potential Building System, which I don't know. That sounds great. And a mentee of Buckminster Fuller, one of my favourites. Yeah,
Wow.
Pete Silver saying, Pete Silver's talking about if you maybe you'd end up with a tree if you did all that engineering. So maybe maybe that's right.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that, Pete. You know, they say that at the time of the dinosaurs, mushrooms were potentially the size of trees. And, you know, it's that environment that they grew in, you know, the high nitrogen levels or the high carbon levels in the atmosphere actually contributed to really large mushrooms that grow very slowly. So when we were actually looking at the application of mycelium in space, mycelium can grow in a void, and you know, depending on what you provide it in terms of atmosphere, you can really alter the way that it grows, which is such an interesting area of research to look into.
That's great. Denali's got a question about have you considered developing mycelium-based products for use in medicinal technology?
We haven't, no, but there are a lot of organizations out there that are doing that. Yeah, but we're just sticking to construction and materials mainly.
Oh, it's Danny Atkinson who's building a boat in his kitchen. I'm sorry, I probably didn't ask his question properly earlier, but he's saying he's seen mycelium surfboards and a makeshift boat before, but nothing on a bigger scale. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it seems its floating properties would counteract the need for fiberglass if weatherproofed.
Yeah. So with surfboards and boats, these products are going to be exposed to some of the harshest environments known to man. You know, salty water, you know, really high humidity, sun, cold, heat. And as you expose your material to all those things, you end up having to protect it by, you know, having some kind of coating on it. So unfortunately, a lot of the surfboards, the mycelium surfboards and boats that we see are more often than not actually they use a resin or like a plastic kind of coating on them to make them more durable. If you use a 100% mycelium, so no substrate at all, that's hydrophobic, and that will be completely unaffected by the water naturally. Salt, however, is, you know, it's really harsh, so I wouldn't know enough to say if that would work in like salt water, but in fresh water, 100% mycelium is completely hydrophobic.
Interesting. Well, look, Ehab, that's absolutely fantastic talk, and also just a great Q&A thing, best one we've had, and a really nice finale to the season. So like, thanks, and everyone's saying thank you so much. It's really great to see someone doing such a project, self-initiated, and I like your title, Director of Innovation. I think we should all that's an excellent job title, and long may it continue. Yeah, really great. Thank you, and good luck with all the developments. And I hope we can bring some students to visit you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much for the invitation. And yeah, I'm more than happy to answer any other questions or speak to anyone who'd like to continue the conversation. Yeah, thank you so much.
Great. No, so can I put, if students are, can I put them in touch with you? Is that okay? You're not going to be, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, no, absolutely. I think it may take a week or more to answer because my email is a bit backlogged at the moment. But yeah, be patient, and I will get back to you. It's always good to CC hello at Biome because if someone else sees it, they'll be much quicker to get back. But absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks again. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you all very much. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye.